Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining the latest SlashData webinar today. My name is Moskula, Head of Client Relations and Strategic Partnerships here at SlashData, and I'm very proud to bring you our latest webinar in collaboration with Stack Overflow. Today's webinar is around developer communities, how and where to engage with your developers. The presentation will be run by our very own Christina Voskoglu, Senior Director of Research at SlashData, and from Stack Overflow, we will be joined by David Gibson, Senior Data Analyst, and Jen Hindle, Senior Product Marketing Manager. Before we get started, I'll run a quick brief on SlashData, who we are and what we do. SlashData is a research analyst firm hyper-focused in the developer economy. Within our global developer surveys, we help uncover who developers are, understanding their profiles, where they are, what they are involved in, population metrics, and even segmentation and more. We explore what they buy, so technology usage and adoption, and what affects developer purchase decisions. And lastly, where they are going. So developer perception about emerging technologies, what they're actively working on, learning about, and what areas are they going next. And I'll let Jen actually jump in and give us a little brief about Stack Overflow if you are not so familiar. Jen?
Thank you so much, and we're so happy to be here today with everyone. I'm Jen Hindle, Senior Product Marketing Manager, and I have a few obnoxious dogs outside my door, so apologies, please. Here at Stack Overflow. Most of you are obviously familiar with Stack Overflow. It's our very popular public site. We're used by developers and technologists around the globe to not only reuse the knowledge that's been built on our site, our platform over the last 12 years, but also add to that knowledge base by asking and answering new questions. So we see about 100 million users every month, which makes us a top 50 global website. And really that pace of questions we see being asked on our site is really staggering. So we see a new question asked every 15 seconds. So what we're going to do today, David Gibson, our Senior Data Analyst here at Stack, is going to share some more about what you can learn from the developer community. We'll talk about the tools and technologies that they've told us that they're using, and we'll explore some of those trending topics that we're seeing on our site based on those questions that are being asked. And then you'll hear from me a little bit to talk about how you can reach and engage the developer community on Stack Overflow. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Jen. And we're about ready to get started. So for some minor details about today, we've got loads of questions from the audience already about a recording. So yes, the webinar will be recorded. For those that are registered, you will be sent a notification of that. And we will be sharing links to the recordings on DevRelX Slack channel as well. If you haven't joined DevRelX Slack, don't worry. We will be sending you a link as well after the event, so not a problem. And about questions and housekeeping, well, we will be taking questions from the audience. If you don't ask anything, I will be asking questions because those who know me know that I will always have something to ask. So do make sure to send in your questions using the Q&A button directly there on your screen. And I will be bringing up your questions at the end of the presentation. And with that, I think, Christina, are you ready to take over from here?
Ready? Yes, thank you.
Awesome. All right,
so let me share my, here we go. Can you see my screen? I hope you can.
Yep, all is there.
Great. So, hey everyone, very glad to be here today. We're going to discuss how and where to engage with developers. And so from their point of view, what they want, what they need, what they expect from you, because this is key to understanding how to engage them better to catch their eye and get their attention. So Moskula told you exactly who we are and what we do, so I won't go into this anymore. But I will go into our methodology and our data, because I'm going to show you data as usual. And so you need to know where all that comes from, and so that you can judge for yourselves really. So what we do is that we run global developer surveys twice per year. And we have done that 21 times actually already. We reach more than 150 countries every single time. In doing so, we reach about 20,000 every survey, so around 30K unique developers annually. And we do that through a wide network of partners and channels, more than 80. It's not the exact 80 every time, to make sure that we don't just follow through some panel or some just a single community through time. And just capture their views, but really get every time reach out afresh and get a representative sample of the developer population out there. So we ask our survey takers, so developers, about 11 development areas that you see here on the left: mobile, desktop, web, and so on. We ask about all of those in every single survey to make sure that, excuse me, we capture their full activity across the stack, across everything they do, because we know that typically they're involved in more than one such activities. And the data I'm going to show you today comes from the 21st Developer Nation survey. It ran between June and September of this year. We reached 90,000 plus developers from 168 countries. And here I'm just showing you, I'm going to show you some stats so that you can see, what our sample looks like, where it comes from, and so on. So it's a global reach, as you can see, spread around the globe, not just coming from just one or two areas, but diversity in our sample. Also, we have people taking the survey. So generally, everyone who's into coding, all age groups, as you can see, from the really young ones to the more seasoned ones, I will not say old ones, and different backgrounds as to where they learn to code, because we have people with really formal education, with undergrad and even postgraduate degrees in computing. But we also have people just taking online degrees, on the job training, and self-taught. You see, most people do that in parallel with something else. So it's really common. So therefore, we also cover all the backgrounds there. We often get that questions, do you have to cover enterprise developers, for example? Yes, we do. We have professionals in all sorts of sizes, of company sizes. Can't show you everything today here, but we do ask them how they're involved in these development areas that I explained, that we track. And as you can see, we have a mix, professionals, hobbies, and students across all areas. Of course, depending on the development area, you get to see more or less professionals. For example, backend in nature has more professionals than it has students or hobbies, while in games is the other way around. Of course, we collect much more than that, which is nearly 200 different data points. Nobody gets to see the 100 questions, don't worry, but there's a lot of information. This is just so that you get a glimpse into the coverage that we have in our surveys. Okay, and with that out of the way, let's focus on the main theme of the day, which is how to engage with developers. So community, of course, is in the center of that discussion, because there has been a lot of talk about community the past, 2-3 years, and lots of efforts to build communities or enable communities and so on. So at the end of the day, what do developers want? What do they consider a successful community to be? Right? So understanding that will give you an idea how to best approach them in a community or enable a community for them. Then we'll talk about where they go to find information. As you will see in a minute, these two topics, 1 and 2, are linked, but I won't tell you how right now, spoilers. Then, okay, they go to find information on what are they learning, and also how they prefer to learn, because that's also important into the how to engage bit. And of course, we will wrap up with some key takeaways. Okay, so communities. What is a successful community? So here you can see all the options we provided to survey takers, to developers. We asked them, okay, things that are, straightforward, like collaborative and interactive and so on. And then things that are really popular among DevRel cycles, like shared identity and goals and moderation and so on. But then let's say softer features, more humane features if you prefer, such as inclusive and helpful, fair, supportive, respectful, and so on. So interesting to see what came out as the most dominant features of successful community. Ta-da, number one was knowledgeable. So half of developers think that the most important thing in a community is to be made up of knowledgeable people. That's where they want to go, to be among knowledgeable people. And of course, they also want this to be active. So they want knowledgeable people that are actually doing something in that community, not just being passive. And now what's interesting, we haven't seen collaborative yet, right? We will though, or interactive or whatever. The third thing that comes up is helpful. So we're going into what I mentioned as soft, let's say, features, more humane features of a community, helpful, also supportive, and then respectful. Okay, what does that tell us? It's more, attitude is important in a community. And so they want to be in a place with knowledgeable people who will be there to support them actively, respectfully, and they will be helpful. And yes, there's also collaboration. It's number 6, which is pretty high up, but it's not at the top. So what's the key takeaway here? Knowledgeable is number 1. If you ask developers, the most important feature of a community is the knowledge. Okay, so we asked that same thing about communities maybe, but in a different way. So we asked them, where do you go to find information? So it's a different angle, right? And see if community will be the first thing they said. Well, it was open source communities, right? So they said they go to places like GitHub or community websites and forums to get information. These were the top 2 answers. And of course, there are official vendor sites to get documentations and stuff, but there's also Q&A sites such as Stack Overflow here, while other resources such as conferences or newsletters or meetups or hackathons rank at the bottom, again, for the fine information, right? They may be going to conferences for other reasons. We know they do for networking. And again, it also depends who we're talking to. This is the overall picture across the developer population. If you start segmenting as we do with our data, you'll find that this picture changes depending who you're talking to. But again, 2 different angles, we get the same answer. Open source communities in general are mostly about learning, about getting information and staying up to date. So, all right, so they said GitHub up here, right? So open source communities. So then we asked them exactly, what do you do? Not exactly, but whether you have public repos or not in GitHub. And yes, 80% of developers are active in GitHub, but close to 40% of those who are in GitHub don't have any public repos. So what that means is that for those people, these people do not contribute code, right? They do not, at least publicly. They either work on private projects or otherwise they're there to learn. They may chat a bit and know for an answer or something, but they're not contributing with code. They're not collaborating public with the wider developer community out there. Therefore, this ties as well, is yet another angle that shows that in many cases, in a sizable chunk of the population, this applies, that they go to get information. And it becomes even clearer if you look at Stack Overflow. So similarly, we asked them whether they use Stack Overflow and what best describes their activity there. And of course, David in a minute will show you more data here. But just my point here is that, of course, the majority does use Stack Overflow, but out of those who do, 40%, 41 don't have an account, which means they're just there for the answers, right? Again, they're not there so much to collaborate or to even contribute somehow, but to just learn. So 3 different angles here. What we've learned is that getting knowledge, learning is super important. All right, so learning what? What do they want to learn? Of course, languages, tools, platforms, the usual suspect. Great. Beyond that, because my point is that if you know the hot topics and you talk about those, then you're more likely to catch their eye and get their attention, right? So every single wave, 20, not 21 times now already, but about 10 already for sure, we have been asking developers about emerging areas, right? What they're currently working on, learning about, or just interested in, but not actively doing anything about it. So this is how the ranking goes based on what they're currently working on. So you can see that mini apps and computer vision are the most widely adopted right now out of emerging technologies. And of course, there's also a lot of interest in them and learning. And at the bottom here of the ranking, you'll find several technologies such as quantum computing and self-driving cars, for which there is interest, but it's just interest that doesn't materialize into anything more than that. Now, but we're interested also in learning. So see, mini apps and computer vision are at the top here when it comes to things developers are actually working on, emerging technologies, not in general. But if we take only those who said they're learning about an emerging technology and rank those, we find that cryptocurrencies come at the top here. They stick out really. So 1 in 3 nearly is learning, out of those learning about an emerging technology, is actually learning about cryptocurrencies. And then it's blockchain other than cryptocurrency that comes second. And these two, as you can see, are actually above computer vision mini apps that rank first in terms of adoption. This implies that maybe in the future, we will see this turning around and having cryptocurrencies and blockchain also at the top of adoption and not just learning. Interestingly, Fog Edge and other things are towards here at the bottom. So this is what they're learning about. Then how do they want to learn? How do they learn? So we ask developers what kind of content do they prefer to consume in different scenarios, when they learn, when they engage with peers, when in research, and so on. So here we're showing you, since we're talking about learning and information, what kind of content they prefer to consume in learning. So as you can see, it is long form video or text that ranks at the top, and then followed by interactive sessions such as code along. So these three are relevant to more than half of developers out there. Therefore, while you have podcasts there at the bottom and forum threads and interactive events and conferences, they're not, okay, they're preferred by 37%, but still they don't rank at the top as a way to learn, a place to learn. It is a networking place for many. And short form text also is not at the top and so on. So it's, let's say, the old school way is still prevails. So long form videos, tutorials, and long form texts. Therefore, these are things to keep in mind when educating developers as to how to learn and offering content to them and engage them through content. Okay, so basically wrapping up everything, that was what I had to tell you today. So first of all, as we said, according to developers, the top attributes of a successful community are knowledgeable and active. Other features that seem to be popular among DevRel circles are like shared identity and goals, or moderated, or self-governed even, or with clear policies. All of those rank towards the bottom. So keep that in mind. Knowledgeable is very important when you're building a community to engage developers. Community is also the most popular place, and we found out by asking where do you go to find information, so in an unbiased way. And turn out that communities is, again, the most popular place where developers go to find information and stay up to date. And indeed, we saw that a good part of GitHub and Stack Overflow users don't collaborate publicly with the broader developer community out there, or contribute. So for these developers, communities are indeed mostly either for learning or to use in private projects in the case of GitHub. So again, we reach the same conclusion. And then, great, learning is important. What are the learning? Of course, you can talk about learning programming languages, learning tools and platforms and so on, but it will be more interesting if you talk to them about emerging technologies. And mini apps and computer visions are the ones that are seeing the most uptake at the moment, but developers are actively learning about cryptocurrencies and other blockchain applications as well. And finally, okay, you want to engage them to help them learn. Emerging technologies is a good idea. How to engage them, what sort of content to offer. We find that long form videos and texts are developers' preferred type of content in learning, followed by interactive sessions. So that's it from me today. Mosula, over to you.
Thank you so much, Christina. We do have a couple questions. We're going to hit them at the end, so we will bring you back later on. Thank you those that have already submitted questions, and please do keep them coming and let us know that they're for Christina, and we'll address them at the end. All right, so with that, I'm going to send you to David from Stack Overflow. Are you ready to take over as well?
Yes, 1 second.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll be here, share your screen, and then let's see, confirm that it's visible. I love your background. We need
Yeah,
one like
thank you. All right, let me present.
Awesome.
Can
Thank
you see
you.
my
On to
screen?
you. Yes, looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Christina. So the second half of this webinar, we're going to be digging into some of the data that we see on our Stack Overflow website, and also some of the insights that we've derived from our own surveys as well. So Jen mentioned some pretty impressive stats about how many page views and us being the 50th top website visited. But as far as for developers, we see that 54% of developers visit Stack Overflow every day, and 82% of developers actually visit a few times each week. So if you're a developer, you're most likely using Stack Overflow in some way, shape, or form, whether you have an account or not. But everyone who writes code pretty much is using Stack Overflow. As for what technologies and tools developers are using, we run a developer survey every year. So this is kind of like a snapshot in time of the developer community. This year, we received over 80,000 respondents. And I'm just going to jump into some of the technologies that developers are mostly using. For languages, we see that JavaScript completes its 9th year as the most popular programming language. And we also see that Python is the 3rd most popular language for the 5th year in a row. Some of the key takeaways is we see these core dominant languages, the JavaScripts, the Pythons, the SQLs, and the Java, as these languages that are here to stay. As new technology is being built on them, they continue to release new versions, and innovation is continued to be made. But then we also have this long tail of more bespoke and domain-specific languages that fill a need for sure. So like the Go's, the R's, even like the Scalas as well. We also see a large amount of developers using data-related technologies. So although we only saw 5 to 6% of data-related professionals, so data scientists, data engineers, or data analysts, we see that data libraries are used by many developers. So for NumPy, we see over 25% of developers have used NumPy, and almost 25% of developers have used pandas as well. So both of these are very data specific Python packages. So the takeaway here is, although a developer might not be directly working as a data professional, they're very likely to touch or analyze data in some way, shape, or form. As for the databases, this has been pretty constant over the last few years, that the top 3 databases are MySQL, PostgreSQL, and SQLite, definitely hinting that SQL is here to stay. But this year we saw that MongoDB surpassed Microsoft SQL Server. So we're very excited to see how this plays out in the following years. No one's surprised, AWS is the most widely used cloud platform, while Google Cloud Platform and Microsoft Azure are pretty neck and neck. One thing we did notice is Google Cloud is more heavily favored by smaller organizations, 10 to 100 and 100 to like 500 employees, while Microsoft Azure was heavily favored by the enterprise organizations with 5,000 plus employees. One thing that was super interesting to me was which integrated development environments developers are using. So Visual Studio Code has become one of the most popular IDEs among all developers. So although there are like developer specific IDEs for like data scientists or data engineers or Python developers or front-end developers, VS Code has created a product that appeals to all developer types. So we see 16% of data scientists actually use VS Code, while only 12% use Jupyter. So if you are familiar with data science and data analytics, Jupyter is a very popular notebook environment, but VS Code seems to be taking over that community of developers. Also, it's heavily favored by students, where 18% of students use VS Code, and the second most popular IDE is only IntelliJ with 8% among students. So the next section we're going to jump into is some insights on our public platform site. So if you're familiar with Stack Overflow, every question has a tag or a set of tags. So for this question, how do JavaScript closures work? We can see that there are the tags here at the bottom. So the first tag is JavaScript, then functions, then variables, scope, and closures. So these pretty much describe the question, and they can include, as you can see, technology specific tags, but they can also include vendor or service specific. So like an Azure specific tag or AWS specific tag. So we can kind of see how these technologies and product offerings actually trend on the website. As for some popular topics that we've seen trending over the last few years, to no one's surprise, we've seen a huge influx of cloud-related technologies. So we're going to be digging into those in the later slides. We've also seen a huge increase in security and blockchain questions asked on the platform. For cloud, we've seen that the pandemic lockdowns actually accelerated cloud migrations up to 3 years. So we ran the scenario of if the cloud-related questions asked on the platform would look like versus what actually happened. So pre-pandemic, we saw that users were asking about 6,000 questions each month. But after the pandemic started, we saw that spiked up to an average of 8,000 questions asked each month. So we saw that this increased the migration to cloud by 3 to 4 years. Another really interesting thing that we can pull out of this is actually seeing what the most viewed content is on the website. So this question here was the most viewed cloud-related question in 2021. So what's really cool here is that this question was actually asked 8 years ago, but this year, almost 200,000 developers have viewed this question. So even though it is relatively old, it is still adding value to the site. And that's something that we are really proud about, is that Stack Overflow, as users are building knowledge on the platform, that's being reused by millions and millions of developers every day. If we look at the tags that are most commonly used with cloud, we can kind of answer a lot of really interesting questions. So we can see which technologies and services organizations are using cloud with. So this would be like Amazon EC2, Google Cloud Compute Engine. We can kind of see how those are being adopted over time. We can also see which types of workloads developers are using. So lots of databases, lots of storage, and serverless computing. And we can also see which programming languages are most likely to be used with cloud technologies. So we can see Java up there, Python, and C#. The other tag topic that we have been monitoring is security. And one very interesting relationship we found is that as the large security breaches are announced to the public, we have seen an increase in traffic and questions asked to security sites, security questions. So in 2016, there were a total of 2 billion records lost due to data breaches. So this triggered an influx of security related questions asked on Stack Overflow and our information security site. So if you guys think back to 2016, this included a Yahoo breach with over 500 million records lost, Friend Finder with 400 million record lost, and a few other ones in the mid 150 million records lost. So some pretty big breaches there. But this has no comparison to the shift to remote work. So in 2016, we saw that spike was mostly due to a large number of data breaches. But in 2020, we saw another spike, which is most likely due to companies being forced to further develop their security features. So 2016 brought the awareness security, but in 2020, companies actually had to implement the security. As we can ask, we can see which security challenges organizations are looking to solve. So what stood out here to me was encryption and authentication. So even though we have pretty great SSO, single sign-on, providers like Okta and Auth0, these are still top of mind for many organizations. The third and final topic that we've been monitoring is blockchain. So we run kind of smaller, more targeted surveys every month or so that are called our Stack Overflow Node surveys. And we conducted one in May that focused on blockchain. So we saw that out of the developers we surveyed, 61% said it was a game changer, but of the 61, only 24% have actually developed with it. So although people believe that it is a very valuable technology, there's not many people who are actually working with it, and those who have worked with it, there's only a fraction that are actually doing so in a professional setting. Oh, and also 62% of those developers who have not worked with blockchain, they actually want to. So it's a very wanted technology to learn and develop for. This is actually my favorite slide. So we saw that blockchain questions tend to peak around major Bitcoin milestones. So we know that blockchain is more than just cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, but pretty much everyone wants to make money. So as Bitcoin reaches those all-time highs, we see that leading up to that or shortly after those periods, there is a large interest of blockchain questions asked on the site. So you can see when it first hit 19,000 and then when it hit 60,000 earlier this year, or was it late last year? Can't remember, but you can definitely see that as those hits those milestones, we're definitely seeing the questions peak at the same time. The third other topics that unfortunately won't be able to dig too much into in this session, but we've seen that have been growing exponentially over the last few years is first is containerization. We've seen a 52% average yearly growth to this tag, or to the tags in this topic. So this would include obviously Docker and Kubernetes, but many, many more, and also the services that are utilizing them. We've also seen big data grow at the same rate, and AI and ML. So although those are kind of old news as far as the hot topics, they're definitely still being implemented, and there's still lots of developers developing for those technologies. And now I will pass it back over to Jen for her to talk about our collectives offering.
Great, thanks, David. If you don't mind just driving for me, since you've got everything up, you don't have to switch back and forth. That would be great, and just save us a few minutes with operational stuff. So if you can go to the next slide. We want to talk about engaging. We've talked a lot about the data and trends that are available that you can learn from your developer community. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how you can engage the developer community and find ways to act on some of those trends and insights that you're seeing. So in our research and in talking with both our community as well as product-focused teams at technology organizations, we know that developers and technologists, and Christina spoke to this earlier, are really looking for communities that help them find and share trusted knowledge. And they want information faster so they can reduce the time away from the task at hand, the coding or the project that they're working on. They're looking for communities that are well supported. And they're also looking for communities that allow for collaboration around shared interests. Product-focused teams at technology organizations are looking for ways to build deeper, longer-term relationships with users of their products and services to really support adoption and, of course, retention of those users once they begin using their products. They're also looking for ways to improve customer experience, streamline support, particularly as that user base grows and you have many more users to support in some way, shape, or form, and lots of questions coming from your user base, and really look at ways to improve user satisfaction. And then you're also looking for ways to uncover insights and patterns, and those insights and patterns can help shape your product strategy. So what's next? Is there a potential integration we should consider? Are your support needs? What type of content should we build that might address some of the questions that we're seeing asked in these developer communities on a regular basis? And it even can help inform your marketing campaigns and messaging as well. So are there common themes that you're seeing in some of the conversations and the questions that are happening on developer communities that you can begin to weave in and make sure from a messaging and positioning perspective when you look at your products and services that you're addressing? So earlier this year, Stack Overflow actually released a new product called Collectives on Stack Overflow that really bridges the gap between those two set of ideals and needs from a developer need perspective, as well as the needs of product-focused teams, be it DevRel, Dev Support, Dev Marketing, and even product management, depending on how the organization is structured. The product is currently in beta. So you may have seen some announcements earlier this year around it. It is currently in beta, a few customers that we're working with currently, but it really enables you to support a number of key business initiatives that, again, we saw as themes throughout these conversations that we had with technology organizations and their business initiatives. And that's around community development and engagement, brand awareness, developer support and experience, and then, as I mentioned, those user and market insights that they're looking to gain from communities. David, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about what collectives will help bring to the table for both a community, the users that are on Stack Overflow, as well as the technology organizations looking to reach them. So collectives actually helps you harness that network effect. So we've talked a lot about collaboration and knowledge sharing and knowledge reuse. So the more users that join a community, the participation benefits those existing users, the new users are receiving value from existing users, and the community as a whole really becomes more valuable and necessary and indispensable. So this really is a way to help provide that value that you're looking for and trust and create that trusted community that your users will continue to come back to. It will enable you to resolve questions with self-service support. So users can turn to the community for answers, freeing up your support resources for some of the more complex issues that take a bit more time and hands-on involvement with. And it can also put social proof in action. So we all know that developers look for those active, engaged communities. So by beginning to engage with your users on Stack Overflow, it can create that community that will organically generate interest and drive adoption and conversation around your products. David, if you go to the next slide. Thanks. And it also really gives you the opportunity to meet users where they already are. So we know David mentioned that developers are coming to Stack Overflow on the regular. So you really have the opportunity to reach millions of users and build deeper customer relationships. So with collectives comes a collectives landing page, and this really gives you a home base on Stack Overflow, and that's something that organizations haven't had in the past. And what that landing page does is it really curates and centralizes all of the content that's associated with your with the tags that are associated with your technologies and products and services on Stack Overflow. So it brings everything into one place. So a developer doesn't have to go to one tag page and another to search for information. It brings everything together in one place, and it amplifies content because you're able to create and distribute high value long form content, which is new to Stack Overflow. So technical content such as how-to guides and knowledge articles are available for organizations that have a collective on Stack Overflow. So it's just one more way to provide an additional type of content to support a need outside of that traditional Q&A format. David, mind? Thanks. And as we talked about, it can really help you transform user engagement and support. So again, thinking about interacting with your users and their preferred channel and delivering trusted answers faster. That's the need of the developer, right? They want to find the answer that they're looking for so they can get back to the task at hand. And in doing so, and in this way, through collectives, you're able to really humanize your brand a bit more. So you're engaging with developers and technologists at scale in a more authentic and relatable way. You have the opportunity to recognize members of the community that have contributed and you deem as subject matter experts, as well as your employees who are on the platform as well. And you can see that badge down at the bottom there, what that looks like as a recognized member of a particular collective. Audio Bubble is our demo community here that we use for these purposes. And we also allow through collectives, the folks that join a collective, there's a whole leaderboard where the experience is gamified. So the more a user contributes to the community, the higher up the leaderboard they go. And we all really know how much developers love that gamified experience. And this certainly plays right into that. And then finally, there's another feature that we call recommended answers. So let's say I'm a developer and I go to a question and it has 10 answers. Historically, developers have said we've got to go through and test, maybe a handful of those 10 that may be the correct answer based on what they're looking to do. With a recommended answer, it identifies an answer that you as a technology organization says, this is the best solution. We see that this is the best solution for this question. So it really helps validate and put your stamp of approval on an answer to a question. So they're able to immediately see, I'll start there. That is a recommended answer. It's trusted before they try the others. So it really does help them find trusted answers faster. Sorry, Dave, go ahead. And finally, the unmatched insights, right? So David shared a ton of data and insights today. And with collectives, you absolutely have, we start to surface all of that data that is available. There's two dashboards. One is actions for you. So as either a recognized member or an admin of a collective on Stack Overflow, you can go to your dashboard and it will tell you exactly what actions you need to take to provide the greatest benefit to your community. So it could be unanswered questions, questions that needed a recommended answer, that sort of thing. So it really helps provide that knowledge and fuel that knowledge and collaboration that's happening on the platform. And then there's an executive dashboard that really surfaces data around the reach of your collective. So think about total questions, answers, members, page views, users, adoption of your collective, how many members you have, how they're contributing, right? We talk about collaboration. So monitoring that as well. And it also provides tag and competitive tag insights. So that's surfaced through these dashboards as well. Okay. And finally, if you're not quite ready for collectives, and we're happy to talk with organizations about collectives to see if it's a good fit for you, we do have our full suite of advertising solutions. So from display advertising to our content syndication type product for technical content, specifically for a developer audience that we call direct to developers, to site and tag sponsorships, and then a number of sponsored content opportunities in our newsletter, our podcasts, and our blog. Those are all available for organizations who may not have the community quite established on Stack Overflow, but this will certainly help build that for you on the platform. And that's all I have for you today. We do have a number of resources that we can share as well, but with that, I'll turn it back over to the SlashData team.
Thanks so much, Jen.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. All right, so we've talked about and you've heard about what developers are looking for in a community, what type of communication they are looking for, what they're actually talking about, and lastly, how to engage with developers using Stack Overflow. So now on to questions. So I'm going to just go through one question for Christina and then one question for David, and then if we have any new questions, we'll pass it on to the Stack Overflow team again. Starting with Christina, I think I'm picking my favorite one. Regarding the slide about 1 in 3 GitHub developers don't collaborate publicly, do you have insights on how that maps to participation in open source? That's a good topic. I know we've covered, so yeah. Let us know.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. Yeah, we do know most people use open source, but they don't all contribute. We do have the data. We could cross it and see how it maps, but I don't have the answer for you right now, how it maps exactly. So
awesome. Yeah, because the open source topic is interesting, and especially in that question. So thank you. And then David, there was a question. Actually, there's a couple. Let me go here. Let's start with this one. Especially going to the containers point. Oh, David, you're already answering that one. You're going to answer it directly, I see in the chat. If you're doing that, fine, we'll skip that one. But we do have a couple others in the chat here. Well, maybe it'll be like a general one here. This data is very insightful, but how should we use it as DevRel folks to operationalize it? So they're building communities, strategy for real-time streaming startup, and observability tool, data pipeline startup, and so on. Whatever startup has devs as its main target audience. So I think they're really, when this came up, if I'm not wrong, came up when you're talking about the tags and talking about those topics that are being discussed. So maybe about how we should use them if we're in DevRel.
Yeah, I would say one immediate thing you can find is if you are building a real-time streaming startup, is looking at the real-time streaming tag. So looking at Kafka and looking at what technologies are being used in conjunction with Kafka. If you're seeing more questions around that are used with an Azure service or an AWS service, that's definitely one way you can frame it. Another way I would say is identifying the pain points of looking at the most popular questions for those technologies and then trying to find those pain points. So if there's like one question that has gotten like 10,000 upvotes or has like 2 million views or whatever, seeing what the core reason of, and if that's a pain point that you can address in your product offering, then that can be very valuable.
Super, and thanks, Jen, for adding that link there for all the tags. Going back to a question, I'm going to jump back and forth. So Christina, you had a question regarding, nope, sorry, here we go. This is referring to the Future Developer Summit. Someone that was probably attending, that's the summit. You had a masterclass, you talked about communities there. And he says, I remember the previous presentation that communities are not that popular or important. What changed? Here's number 2 item, where developers, so where do developers go first, and how important are communities?
Yeah, that is a great question. Actually, nothing changed. The exact same graph was there as well about how they go, where to go to find information. But excuse me, in that presentation, we discussed about measuring success in DevRel. And the point was that it's not that communities are not important overall. It's not just about building a community. It's not about just communities. Also, we also showed you that it's what developers expect from you. They don't expect vendors to build a community. It's not that open source communities or other communities in general are not important to them. It's not something that they expect from vendors. And we showed that what they expect from vendors has, again, to do with education, with training, with tutorials, and so on. So actually, these two presentations are very well at sync and in agreement. It's just what we were saying there had to do with the success metrics, and therefore, as a vendor, you should not focus on building a community yourself. You should focus more on offering training and education to developers wherever that might be. So that was the difference.
Yeah, so it's, you can, it's basically prioritize your resources, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And if you have limited resources, maybe that shouldn't be the first thing that you go and do. But yeah.
Well, here we are saying that, communities, developers do go to open source communities so to get information and set date. They won't so much go to a vendor built communities. They will go to official vendor websites to get documentation and stuff. But otherwise, in a community, they expect to find peers, right?
Yeah.
So
awesome. Thank you, Christina. I'm taking time. David, now this is now towards you. There's been a question on any data on, I think both, we also have that, and I think you have it too, on APIs used most by developers. Do you have data on that in your survey?
Can you define what you mean by API?
APIs? Well,
yeah.
Well, I'd have to lean that into, yeah. I would understand maybe it's type of APIs, so API category, if you will, or a type of, I would lean into that by default. But Abba, if you have something, please do.
Yeah, feel free to add more context. But in our developer survey, we don't specifically ask about APIs, but that is something that you can definitely derive from the public platform and looking at those tags and the total questions and that, but we don't have a survey point for that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And I know we lean into API category or type, Christina, if you know that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome, but we don't have the data available now. Sorry. If you want, reach out to both of us, both Stack Overflow and SlashData, and we'll try and help you following. All right, we have a few minutes more left. Thank you, David, also for answering some of those questions in the chat. You have a follow-up question, I think here. Actually, there's a question about pricing on collectives. Someone mentions that they had a pricing issue, if you will. Is that where can they go for pricing model and understand that, or can you talk about that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the pricing model from a high level, and then I encourage everyone to just reach out to us. With us being in beta, we can talk with you one-on-one, and it really does depend on the size of the community and making sure your community on Stack Overflow to ensure it's a good fit. But essentially, there's a platform fee that covers all of the features and functionality that's available within the platform. And then there's an additional component of a page view fee. So all the page views that are generated that are part of that are associated with the tags within your collective. But happy to chat with you through and walk you through that and what that looks like, particularly for our beta partners as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. Yeah. And then there's a follow-up, David, about if the containers point, if it was base 2, is only an increase of 1. So trying to get an idea of current base to support the growth of container use /tag. In general, it's growing.
Reread it. yeah. Let me reread that real quick.
Yeah, go ahead on the Q&A. I'm understanding it's about the growth of container usage.
Yeah, it's an increase of, if I might not be understanding this totally, but it's just year over year, there's an average of 150% growth each year.
Of the use of the container tag.
Yeah, of questions asked around that.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we that I also wanted to lean into, is that you mentioned and you see the containers, I think it's MLAI, and one more I'm missing that you had in that slide. But it's something that I think you said it was consistent over time. So this is regardless of COVID, these are trends that you're seeing increase.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with the cloud, we saw that trend pre-COVID for sure, but the pandemic lockdowns definitely accelerated it. But now we're kind of converging of where we would have been regardless. There was just the pandemic spike is what we're calling it, that we see in a lot of different technologies, that there was this added increase to either learn and upskill during the pandemic, or an actual need to implement this technologies for example, like cloud and security. There was definitely a need for AI, and maybe like mobile, there's more of just a desire to learn and upskill in those technologies.
Awesome, thanks so much. And again, it's I'll repeat it here as well. You will get access to the recording. We haven't, and I'm not sure if we're doing slides and things, but the recording will be sent following, and you'll get a link to that as well. So not to worry about that. And I think we're out of time for another question. I don't want to, I don't see any questions that we can answer super quickly. I think we've covered most of them. Yes. Oh, actually, really quick. What is the definition of a mini app? Christina, I think you had mini app leaning into your slides.
Yeah. So mini apps are small scale apps actually used in platforms, usually in conversational platforms. So in WeChat, for example, they're pretty common. And they're being used as on top of the chat to do several little jobs there. That's a brief description, I guess.
All right, short and sweet, good enough, and on time, so we can end here. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jen, for joining. Thank you to Stack Overflow for running this quick event with us. It was a pleasure, and we hope to do this again. And I think we do have some things coming up soon together, so that'll be interesting. Stay tuned for future Developer Summit and DevRel X. Yeah, at end of the year, we will come back to you all and sign up for the Future Developer Summit for sure, because we will be coming back. Everyone here more likely will be there again. So thanks. Bye for now.
Thank you all. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.